Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second catch-up session for GCSE Biology. If you missed last week's session on genetic inheritance, the video and resources are available online for you to watch as part of your revision. My name is Mrs. Cedar, and I will be running the chat facility this afternoon. Feel free to ask questions or share your answers. I will now hand you over to Mrs. Burt, who's going to lead the session on cell division.
Thank you, Mrs. Cedar. Hello everyone, Mrs. Burt here. You may already have seen that I've started the slide by saying, say Meiosis to help with the spelling, and as much as I can, I will actually pronounce it as Meiosis because it really will help you get these spellings right in tests, because the exam board are very, very precise in the way they mark the spellings of mitosis and meiosis. So here we go. Now, as Mrs. Edat has actually mentioned, there's a chat bar facility here. The webinar is 40 minutes long, just in case you haven't been on one of the webinars before. You will find that I'll leave short pauses for you to attempt some parts of the questions. But the idea of the webinar is that you will have copies sent out to you at the end. So you'll have the webinar, you'll have the materials that goes with it. And that will enable you to go back over and check something at a time that suits you and also at your pace. So here we go then, let's have a look at cell division. So I'm going to talk about what cell division is. So these are the sort of questions that I'd like you to be thinking about. We're going to look at what is mitosis and what is meiosis and why do they take place. We're also going to look at how daughter cells compare to the original parent cells. Some people call them mother cells, so parent, mother, it's the same, but parent with daughter cells. And then the last part, can I compare the outcomes of mitotic and meiotic division? And what we'll do as part of that is we'll look at some past paper questions and talk you through those. So let's start then. Now, we talked last week, if you remember in the webinar, about the fact that chromosomes are found in the nucleus. They are threads, they're made of the chemical DNA. And you can see here in the diagram, I've got what looks like an animal cell. It's a fairly roundish shape. You can see the nucleus, and in the nucleus there are these threads called chromosomes. Now, chromosomes are made of DNA, and that DNA is sectioned up into genes, which you heard about last week. You can see I've just popped a little image there. So it's an old black and white image of chromosomes, and you can see that each chromosome seems to be made of 2 strands, and I'll come to that in a little bit, but chromosomes are made of DNA. Now, I just want to mention that before cell division occurs, the DNA needs to replicate, and that means it needs to make copies of itself. So you can see from this image here that we've got 2 chromosomes here. And just to help you figure it out a little, I've got 2 alleles on here. This is the big A allele on the blue chromosome, and then there is the little A allele on the pink chromosome. And what happens is, so before any cell division occurs, we have to double the DNA to make, so there's enough DNA in the daughter cells that are formed. And you can see this is what's happened here. So the one chromosome is now made of 2 strands. It's now double the DNA, but you can see that the alleles are still exactly the same. So the big A allele has had a copy made. So we've now got double. We've got the 2 alleles, and that is the same all the way through the chromosome. And it's the same for the pink chromosome as well. And you can see there the 2 little A alleles. So it's important to remember that DNA absolutely replicates before cell division occurs. So moving on then, so we know we've got 46 chromosomes in body cells. We've discussed that last session, and body cells make up most of the body. They're not all of the cells in the body, but they make up most of the cells. But you can see from that image there in front of you that actually we have 46, or they're arranged in 23 pairs. You might be wondering why they're actually arranged in pairs, and that's because when we were first formed, when we were just 1 body cell big, then actually 23 of our chromosomes came from the mother's egg and 23 came from the father's sperm cell. And that is why we have these pairs, because one member of the pair came from the egg cell and one member of the pair came from the sperm cell. And that is the same for all of the 46 chromosomes. Just linking back to last session as well, remember that even though I might talk here in this case about human chromosomes being 46 in our body cells, it's worth you remembering that in different species there are different numbers. Now you won't have to know this. You, in any test or in any exam, they'll tell you what the number is. You just need to follow the basic idea. The body cells will have so in a chicken here, you can see that a chicken has 39 pairs of chromosomes, and you'll only have one set of the pairs in the chicken sperm or egg cell. Okay, moving on again. So we're going to look first of all at the type of cell division called mitosis. Now mitosis is pretty important because it's used for growing cells, repairing cells, and to replace worn out cells as well. So 3 parts to the jobs of mitosis. If you have a little look at the diagram I've got here, you can see that the parent cell has, in fact, in this case, got 4 chromosomes. So we're looking at a different number here. So the body cell number here is 4. You can see the 4 chromosomes inside the nucleus. The first thing that happens is that the DNA is going to replicate. So before mitosis occurs, DNA is going to replicate, and you'll now see these little funny shaped little chromosomes, just like we've seen before, as each one has now made a copy of each other. We've now got double the amount of DNA in each of these chromosomes, but there's still 4 chromosomes at this stage. They're held together by a little part called a centromere. And then what happens, excuse me, in mitosis is that we produce 2 daughter cells from those, because every one of these chromosomes, one of the copies goes into this cell on the left and the other copy goes into this cell on the right. And so from that we make our 2 daughter cells. But you will notice that actually the 2 daughter cells made have got exactly the same number of chromosomes. So if we started with a parent cell of 4 chromosomes, we've now got 2 daughter cells, each with 4 chromosomes, and that's a really important fact to remember. But they are also genetically identical, just like I showed you in the previous slide with the big A, and the little a, they are genetically identical. All the alleles are exactly the same. So just as another example then, so if you started with a cell that had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chromosomes, then in mitosis you'd produce 2 daughter cells, each would have 6 chromosomes. And as I say, this is the way to grow cells, or to replace like with like cells, or to replace damaged tissues and worn out cells. Now, some organisms, I have to tell you, use mitosis as their way of reproducing, and bacteria are a classic example of this. This image on the left-hand side is a bacterial cell, so you can see they're single-celled organisms, and they're a bit different from us because they've only got 1 chromosome, and you can see it there in the middle of the cell. And what happens is that chromosome makes a copy of itself in DNA replication. So even though you can't really see it clearly there, you can see it's doubled its DNA, hopefully, but you can't see that it's made of 2 separate chromosomes. And what happens in mitosis is that those chromosomes separate, they go into separate parts of the cell, but this cell is now longer, it's grown since the cell started. And then what happens is that little dip, that little sort of crease there in the cell there, what happens is that actually is the point at which these 2 cells are then going to split, and you can see one cell of 1 chromosome has now made of it's now made of 2 genetically identical cells, each with a chromosome. We call this binary fission, and you can see a little image there in colour, so you can see it a little bit more clearly. The pink parts are the chromosomes, so there's a chromosome in that part of the cell, there's a chromosome in that part of the cell, and you can see where there's that pinching in point there. And so what will happen is the cytoplasm there will eventually, the membrane, the cytoplasm, the wall will eventually pinch in so much this will become two separate cells. Okay, so there's a fair amount of information so far, so time for a quick little quiz. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give you a series of questions, and I'm going to ask you to think about whether they are true or false. Okay, so now is the time. If you want to jot something down, you can, and what I'll do is I'll give you a sort of time to think as I go through the questions, and then I'll reveal the answers. So DNA in a parent cell needs to replicate before it divides. So does DNA in a parent cell need to replicate before it divides? True or false? Have a think about that one. Next question. Mitosis is just used for growth and repair of cells. So is mitosis just used for growth and repair of cells? True or false? Third, mitosis produces one body cell every time the parent cell divides. So is there just one new body cell every time the parent cell divides? True or false? Number 4, if a parent body cell has 20 chromosomes, the daughter cells will have 20. True or false? And then finally, daughter cells made in mitosis are different to the parent cell. True or false? So you should have ideas now about all 5 of those. So let's have a little look. Were you correct? So first one, DNA in a parent cell needs to replicate. Absolutely true. DNA has got to make copies of itself so that there is enough DNA in the daughter cells. Brilliant. That's the first one. Number 2, this one's false. Bit of a trick one, this one. Mitosis is just used for growth and repair. I try to emphasize that. Well, it's false because it's also needed for replacement of cells as well. Number 3, this one's another false. Mitosis produces one body cell? No, 2 cells are made, otherwise you wouldn't get any growth. If you were just replacing one cell with one, you'd never actually carry on getting bigger. You'd just be replacing like for like. Number 4, yeah, it is true. If you start with a body cell of 20 chromosomes, you will produce daughter cells, each of 20 chromosomes. They're identical in number. So well done if you got that. And then the 5th one, this is false. Daughter cells made in mitosis are different. No, they're not. They're absolutely genetically identical. So well done if you got some of those. And as I say, you can pop back later and have a little check at the questions again. So moving on then. Now we've talked about mitosis and I talked about body cells, but there are a different sort of cell and they are gamete cells, and they are egg and sperm cells. And so to make gametes, a different type of cell division is needed. This type of cell division has got to halve the chromosome number. Okay, so we've got to have half the number, and I'll explain why in a little while. It is called meiosis. And what we're going to do now is we're going to look at why it actually needs to result in cells that have got half those numbers that we started with. So if we just go back to that idea that human body cells have 46 chromosomes, that means 23 pairs. When gamete or sex cells are made, they have half this number. So have a little look at this diagram to start with. So what we have here is a female that's produced egg cells. And those egg cells, this is a human female, so this egg cell has 23 chromosomes. This male has produced sperm cells, and actually these sperm cells have 23 chromosomes, half the human number. And then what happens is that when the egg and the sperm cell fertilise, so when the sperm and egg join together, when their nuclei join together, they produce a fertilised egg cell called a zygote. Now you can see that there are now 46 chromosomes. Now, if the egg and the sperm cells weren't 23, then we would have the wrong number of fertilization, and then we wouldn't have the correct human number. So what will happen then is this zygote will eventually then will grow into an embryo and fetus and so on. But you can see there that after sperm has fertilized egg, we've got the fertilized egg cell, which grows from there. Now, hopefully you can see now that if you didn't have 23 chromosomes in the egg and 23 in the sperm, you wouldn't get the correct human chromosome number, which is 46. The other thing to tell you is that we always call the body cell number the diploid number. So 46 in humans is the diploid number, whereas the gamete cells, they've got half the number, and we call that the haploid number. So let's have a little look at these arrows now then to try and work out what processes of cell division are going on here, because this is where we can connect the two types of cell division. So first off, in order to produce egg cells or sperm cells, I'd said that you need to undergo meiosis. All right, so we've now got half the number, and we'll come back to the detail in a little while. And then, of course, that's important because then we restore the chromosome number, which is 46. And then after that, we need to grow an embryo from the zygote and a fetus. And so this is the point at which mitosis occurs. Okay, so it's really important for you to realise that egg and sperm cells, gametes in other words, are formed through a meiosis. But once we've restored the number and we're back to 46, you've got to grow that cell into the billions more cells that form a human. And the way of doing that is to actually produce cells that have got the same number, that's 46, and that is mitosis then. So let's have a look at the detail of the type of cell division, which is meiosis. So if we have a little look at these images here, you can see I've numbered a few of the diagrams, and you can see from A there, the chromosome number is 4. So we're not talking 46, so we're looking at a different number. We've got a chromosome of 4. So in that cell, the number is 4. And then what happens as you move along here, you can see that these chromosomes have made a copy of themselves. So the DNA, just like in mitosis, has actually replicated. So we've just doubled the number. And then what happens is we get to B. So between A and B, all that has happened there is that the DNA has doubled. You will, if you're very eagle-eyed, notice that we started with just pure red and pure blue chromosomes, and what's happened in the processes between A and B is that these seem to have switched some of their alleles around. Okay, and they've actually, we call it crossing over, they've crossed over different parts of their chromosome. So you can see they're now a little different. So in this first division, so here we go, we've now got slightly different chromosomes, and we've got double the amount of DNA, and we go into our first division. Now between B and C, we've got first division. But you can see we've got a chromosome number still of 4 here, because the number is still 4. They've got double the DNA in them, but they're still 4. And then what happens is the chromosomes split apart. Well, the pairs of chromosomes here, this large blue one and this large red one, they go into separate cells. So what happens in the second division is, after the first division, is the chromosome number has now gone down by half. All right, you can see one of the large chromosomes and one of the smaller chromosomes. So after the first division in meiosis, the chromosome number is 2. So it's gone, it's halved in that first division. And that's a really important little fact for tests and past paper questions. So The next thing that happens now is there is a second division. And in this second division, what happens is the DNA in these chromosomes, yes, these chromosomes themselves are actually then pulled apart from each other. And you can see if we look at this cell at the bottom here that I'm looking at now on my pointer, you can see that one half of the chromosome now goes into this cell, this daughter cell, and the other half of the chromosome that's mainly blue but it's got a little red tip goes into this daughter cell. And the same thing happens with the little red chromosome there. And so what happens after the second division is that the chromosome number is still 2. So it halves after the first division but stays the same after the second, because what's happening here is the chromosome number isn't changing. What's happening is the DNA is actually being split into each of these daughter cells. Okay, so just to summarize what's happening there then, in meiosis you make 4 daughter cells. You get cells, those daughter cells have got half the chromosome number, so we call them haploid. They are genetically different. Now, you don't need to know a lot of detail about that at GCSE, but as I've said, what happens earlier on in this process, before we saw the first division, there's some swapping of alleles going on, and so they end up being genetically different from each other. And of course, now because they are that haploid half number, they're now sex cells or gametes, and all that happens now is that they gradually then turn into something that begins to look a bit more like a sperm cell with a tail or an egg cell. Okay, so those are the sort of the basic points of meiosis. And as I've said before, it's really important that for tests and exams and so on, you know, you may be given a question that's not 46. So in this case, it's 4 and 2. Diploid is 4, haploid is 2. So you've just got to work with the information that you're given in a question. So how was meiosis different from mitosis then? So we've got mitosis, we have the one body cell and it makes 2 genetically identical cells. And you can see here that they've got exactly the same chromosome number. So how is our meiosis different? Well, you can see that there are 2 divisions here. So we've got the first division, which takes the chromosome number down by half. And then we have our second division, which keeps the chromosome number the same as in the first division, but actually we know that there are differences or variations in those cells. And that's a really important thing to remember, because next week you'll be covering natural selection and evolution, and that fact is pretty important for that. Okay, so the gamete cells produced in meiosis give rise to what we call variation. So a little summary again, you can see I just want to emphasize these 2 divisions in meiosis. The first division taking the chromosome number in this human example here from 46 to 23, and you've got 4 haploid cells, each with 23, and then you can see in mitosis you've got your diploid cell and it produces 2 daughters that are each diploid. So that's the basic pattern that you need to remember. And just as sort of a little summary, in mitosis they're genetically identical, same number, growth, repair and replace, whereas in mitosis this is where the sex cells are made, the gametes. They are genetically different, as we've said, and they contain half the number, so they're haploid and not diploid. So that's sort of a summary of all of those things. What I want you to do now is I want you to sort of pause a little bit, and I want you to look. There are some options there on the left-hand side of each of those processes and the number of cell divisions and the number of daughter cells. So have a little look. So how are the cell divisions different? How are the number of daughter cells made different? What's the chromosome number like in the daughter cell compared to the original, the parent, the mother cell? What is the genetic composition compared to the original? Is it the same? Is it different? And what is the purpose? So just to give you a little bit more of an option, all right, then you may have thought of these, but actually what you have to do is you have to choose. So for mitosis, are the number of cell divisions 1 or 2, and the same for meiosis. So I'm just going to pause while you have a little look and you make some decisions. Okay, so just because we need to move on, what I'm going to do now is I'm just actually going to reveal the slide. And actually, as we've been through before, the number of cell divisions is just 1 in mitosis, but 2 in meiosis. The daughter cells are different. In mitosis, just the 2, whereas in meiosis, it's 4. We've got the chromosome number is the same in mitosis, but it's not. It's half the number in meiosis. The composition in mitosis of the daughter cells is identical, whereas in meiosis we know it's genetically different because it gives rise to variation, and we know they've got different purposes, these types of cell division. In mitosis we are growing, repairing, replacing, whereas in meiosis we're making gametes, we're making sex cells, we're making egg and sperm cells, or in plants we're making pollen and ovule cells. So let's have another little recap then. We'll just do another quick true or false, and then we're ready for some past paper questions. So, okay, first thing, mitosis makes 2 daughter cells, true or false? So I'm going to go through this a little quicker. Meiosis makes 2 daughter cells, true or false? 3, the daughter cells in mitosis are genetically identical to the original cell, true or false? Number 4, meiosis makes daughter cells with half the chromosome number. Is that true or false? And our last part, mitosis, is used to make the sex cells, true or false? So I'm hoping that actually now we've got yes. Number 1, that is false. Mitosis only makes 2 daughter cells. So well done if you've got that correct. Meiosis makes 2 daughter cells. We've got them round the other way. That is again, that's a false one because it makes 4 cells. Well done. Number 3, the daughter cells, that is certainly true. They are genetically identical in mitosis. So well done, Diane, with that one. Number 4, meiosis makes daughter cells with half the number. Absolutely true. So that on fertilization, you can restore the chromosome number. And then the last one, that's false. Mitosis doesn't make the sex cells. That's good old meiosis, as we know. So let's have a little look now. Let's put that information into practice with some past paper questions. So what we have here is a question, and it says the following diagram represents the stages in the life cycle of a mammal. The numbers of chromosomes in cells at different stages in the life cycle are shown. So in this case, look, they've given us the chromosome number. We've got 40 in this case, a male of 40 and a female of 40. And we can see that in producing the gametes, we've now got half the number. So the male produces gametes of 20, the female produces gametes with half the number of 20. And then something's happening here to the male gamete and the female gamete because they are producing a cell that's now the same as the body cell in the parents that we started with. And then after that point, what happens is that more cells are made, R and S. So let's look at the first question. Name the type of cell. Or before we do that, let me just go back over and just think about what is happening in these cases. Now, I'm hoping that you can see that this is meiosis, because what you've got here is that you've got two things going on in your cell division. We've actually got half the number being produced. So I'm hoping that you've spotted that that is meiosis in that case up at P here. Okay, then I'm hoping you had thought that actually what's happening between the male and the female gametes there is fertilization is taking place, and that is now why you've got the chromosome number of 40. And then the last thing is that if you're now actually, you've now got your cells, your body cell number, your diploid number of 40, what's now taking place is growth is taking place. So we're doubling cell number, but actually what we're doing is we're keeping the chromosome number the same. So there are a couple of telltale signs on this question, you know, about meiosis and mitosis. But the first thing is to grasp that because the number, the body cell number, was halved, the P in fact is meiosis, as I was saying. Okay, let's have a look at another question. So this time it says the diagram shows the two different types of cell division, A and B, which occur in the human body. So we're back to a human number now. So we've got 46 in both of these, A and B. So we've got human body cells. Now, the telltale signs again is that we have two cell divisions taking place with body cell A and only one cell division with body cell B. So if we start with, it says at the bottom, name the type of cell division shown in diagram A. So let's have a little look. It's got two divisions. We've got no more clues than that at the moment. We've got two cell divisions and we've got 4 cells. So we should be able to work out from that in actual fact, A is meiosis. Okay, so that is the type of cell division occurring there. The cells in stage 1, it says, contain 46 chromosomes. Complete the diagram by writing in the number of chromosomes found in each of the cells in stage 2 and 3. Now, if you've worked this out, that this is meiosis here, you will know that actually these cells in stage 3 are now our haploid gametes. They've got half the number. So I would, if this was me, I'd be going straight to that and I'd think stage 1, right, I've got diploid, stage 3, I've got haploid gametes. So each of those are going to have 23 chromosomes, exactly half the number. Now, we also know that the chromosome number halves in the first division. So what's happening in this first division from cell A here to stage 2 is that we're halving the chromosome number. So we've got 23 in each of those. And then in cell B, because the next question is oh, hang on, it says the cells drawn in stage 3 develop into specialized cells. What's the name given to these cells? Well, we know they are the gametes, okay? But to sort of follow through what's happening in the diagram there, we know that in stage 1, cell B, we are producing genetically identical cells of exactly the same chromosome number. So we know stage A, sorry, A in stage 3 has produced haploid gametes. We can call them egg and sperm cells, or you can call them gametes, doesn't matter actually. And then what they're asking us to do here is they're asking us in D to actually say whether these cells are genetically identical or they're different. And we now know they are different from each other and they're giving rise to variation, and that can affect natural selection. One process which it says there, during which the type of cell division shown in B would occur, well, we're producing exactly the same number of cells. So that will be growth or repair or replace. This question, we start with a mother cell of 38. We've got daughter cells equally the same number, 38. So what's the type of cell division? Well, you know, I think we've seen this before. It's mitosis. Why? Because it's got the same number of chromosomes. And actually what we have down here is an example where we've got cells before meiosis. There are 46. So the sex cells will be half that number. And then there's a working back. We've got the number of sex cells at 40. So let's work back to the cell number before that, the body cell number. So that will be 80. And then how many cells would be produced if you had meiosis? Well, there would be 4 cells and they would be there to produce the gametes. So Another type of question that you could come across would be a longer answer question. And in this one, we can see the two different processes. We can see that there's just one cell division in A, but we've got in B, I mean, it also appears that there's one cell division, but the important thing to pick up from this is we are producing 4 cells and they've got half the number, whereas in A, we've got identical numbers of chromosomes in the results. So the question says, use the diagrams and your own knowledge, state which diagram shows mitosis and which one shows meiosis. So from from the fact that we've got identical numbers of chromosomes in A, that is mitosis, I hope you'll agree, and in B, that is meiosis, because that's got half the number. And the last thing it asks us to do is it asks us to actually look at the function of each type of cell division, and we know it's growth, repair, replace, or in fact making the gametes. Okay, so you can see there a little summary that I've popped there for you to have a look at. Now, the very last thing I want to talk about is an approach to a longer answer question. So how would you describe, how would you explain the differences between mitosis and meiosis for yourselves? So you've got to actually say what the differences are, and to explain it, you've actually got to say why those differences are there. Now, I always approach this with what I call a keyword stack. So I go through this process where I think, right, I've got 2 processes there. I've got to use my own knowledge. I am now going to actually, on a piece of paper, put all of the keywords I can think that relate to mitosis and meiosis. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to think, how is it that I could put each of those keywords in a sentence, or could I put several sentences together so they make sense? Because it's really important in the exam that you actually put your points together in a logical, a sensible sequence, because there'll be marks for that. But also you've got to get the words, you've got to use them accurately, you've got to use keywords, so that's correct terminology, but you've got to use them accurately, which is why it's good to pop them in a sentence. So if you were thinking of keywords, if I was doing this for myself now, then, I mean, you might be thinking immediately now, what keywords could I think of from this topic that we've covered so far? Mitosis seems like an obvious, doesn't it? Meiosis. 1 cell making 2, maybe. 1 cell making 4. Daughter cells, chromosomes, DNA replication, daughter cells being genetically identical, asexual reproduction, daughter cells showing variations, or are they genetically different? Gametes and the types of cells, which could be gamete cells. Haploid, half the number as parents. Then we've got daughter cells, diploid number, same number as the parent cell again. Growth, repair and replace. And you've got all of those keywords together. And of course, what you need to do now is you need to actually think about putting them into sentences. So I've just got a few examples here now. So using some of those words, I say you can go back, you can use those and look at those at your leisure. Mitosis produces 2 daughter cells for every parent. Meiosis produces 4 cells. And what I've done is I've actually put those words now in what I think are sort of sensible sentences. They're not necessarily in the correct order at this point now, okay, but they are in sentences together. All right, so there's a number of sentences that have got quite a lot of those keywords in there. Now, my next approach would actually be to actually put them in a sensible order, in a correct order, where I can join one sentence to the next. So I've unjumbled the sentences now, and I've actually got them in a correct order. And then I've done that for mitosis, and now I'm doing the same for meiosis. So try to go back over these and see the connections I'm making from one point to the other, having got all of those key words. Excuse me, and then what I would do eventually is I would join them all together, and there I'd have my 6 out of 6 mark answer. And it's really important to get all of your keywords together, because once you've got the keywords and you understand how those keywords link together, then you can craft an answer which is truly worthy of 6 marks out of 6. Now, you can then, once you've got your keywords, adapt those into all sorts of ways. So for instance, we could look at compare and contrast the two types of cell division. So I've given you some examples here. For instance, in mitosis, the parent cell makes 2 daughter cells in each cell division, while in meiosis, 4 are made. So in mitosis, the number of chromosomes are the same number as parent cells, while in meiosis, they are half. Although you could use it in a different way. Mitosis and meiosis are both types of cell division. They are similar because their DNA replicates. So there are lots of things that you can do with those keywords. I will just leave you with something that my students find really, really useful, because what we've done is we've produced these dice sheets. And when you're struggling for somebody to help you with your revision, what you can do is you can actually use these to actually help you recall the facts. So for instance, you could have somebody who's got this sheet saying to you, where in the cell do you find chromosomes? That's 1 across, 1 down. And you could say, just test me on 4 across and 4 down, or whatever it happens to be. And then the person working with you has got the answer. So they don't have to be a biologist, they can be your family, they can be there just sort of checking that detail for you and giving you your instant feedback. I've just popped a blank sheet in there as well for you to maybe develop that idea for other topics and actually use that as part of your revision. So I just want to finish then, just to say there's plenty of information out there, and I really hope you've actually understood what I've been teaching you and you've found it useful. The next session, which is next Tuesday, same time again, 5:20 until 6 o'clock, we're going to develop the idea now of the principles of evolution by natural selection. So please do, as I've said in some of these cases, try and teach each other, try and get somebody to help you with your learning so that you're best prepared. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for listening.